How's it going, everyone, and welcome to another Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 video. Today in the Flight Design CTSL, going over the cold and dark start to cruise checklists. Now, if you've watched any of my videos in the past having to do with the startups or the shutdowns of the aircraft in the sim, you'll know that I try to base the checklists and the associated booklet that I create off of the procedures that would actually happen in the real world aircraft, as long as they are able to be done in the sim, right? Well, I usually try to find some sort of documentation or video. For this aircraft, for the CTSL, I couldn't find anything at all except for like a 2-sentence little blip on a Wikipedia page, really only telling me the gross weight of this aircraft. So if you're wondering why the booklet for this aircraft is a little skimpy, I guess you'd say, and there's no like avionics information, that sort of thing, really the only thing that I had to go on was the gross weight and a few parts of the like startup checklists and that sort of thing, because the only document I found was on the CTSW. I found stuff on the CTLS, the LSI, and the CTSW. So I kind of just had to base it off of common sense and that piece of documentation that I had. So this may not be entirely accurate, but I think based on my common sense of having flown in flight sims for a couple years now, I think it's pretty realistic. And obviously, if there's something that is drastically wrong, I'm more than willing to go in and change that, whether it be in the booklet or even just doing a brand new video for this. So with that being said, this booklet and this video should only be used for simulation purposes only and should not be a substitute for actual aircraft training. Get that training from a reputable source. All right, so let's go ahead and get into starting this aircraft, the CTSL. Slowly becoming one of my more favorite aircraft to fly. We're going to start with the before engine start checklist. We're going to come down here to the fuel valve, this little red lever here. We're going to go ahead and flip that into the open position. We are going to pull the engine choke to on. We're going to make sure our throttle is at idle, which indeed it is idle. Check to make sure our electronic equipment is off. Looks good to me. Everything looks off. And now we can turn on the battery master switch and the alternator master switch into the on positions. We can go ahead and set our parking brake. Usually this would be on if you're coming into the aircraft, if you're flying it like a week ago or something like that. But when you spawn into the sim, you have to actually put it on before you start the engine. This aircraft does have a tendency to float a little bit when you are starting the engine, so make sure that that parking brake is indeed on. Our throttle is still at idle. We haven't changed it. We can go ahead and check to make sure the area around our aircraft is clear, which, yep, it looks good to me. Besides the guy in the little pushback tug there, he'll be safe in that position. So now we can go ahead and come down to the ignition switch, turn that into the start position, and release when the engine fires. And we can turn the choke off as the engine is already rolling. The oil pressure should start coming up, which it indeed has. The oil temp will start to rise as well. You'll see it stabilize at about the 115, 120 mark over time. And then this is just our cylinder head temp that'll come up when we raise the RPMs. So we can actually adjust the throttle to 2,000 RPMs. So we'll go ahead and watch the tack here. Get it up to 200. I did overshoot it a little bit. We'll put it right there at 2,000 RPM. We can now turn on our avionics master switch, our beacon light, and our position light. We're going to go ahead and come down to the ignition now, and we need to watch both the tack and do some stuff with the ignition switch. So we're going to come here, we're going to set it to the second position, and looking for less than a 300 RPM drop, which it does drop a little bit, but nowhere near the 300 RPM limit. We'll put it into position 1, no change as expected, and we'll put it back to both, and our RPMs will be restored. Everything looks good on the engine start. Now we'll move to the before taxi checklist. We'll have the radio and transponder set and turned on. We won't do that in this video specifically. We're not talking to ATC for the radio, and we're not doing too much with the transponder in this one either, but obviously you would do that in an actual VFR flight scenario. This aircraft isn't meant for IFR. It can be thrown around in bad weather, so it is a VFR only aircraft. We would set the altimeter after recording the AWOS. Our altimeter is here with the knob, the calibration knob right there. We would set our GPS as required. This is a different GPS, or it's a similar GPS in a different style as some of the other aircraft. We can actually turn it on and off here with this button, which is another pretty cool feature of this aircraft. We are going to check our engine instruments one more time. Everything looks good for me. Our oil temp has stabilized, our pressure is looking good, and everything else looks fine and dandy to me. All right. So we are going to move to the taxi checklist and taxi out to the runway. So we want to put our throttle back into idle, and we want to release the parking brake. And during our taxi, we are going to obviously check the brakes and check our steering to make sure that everything works as expected. We're going to go ahead and turn here, make sure we missed the dude on the tug, which is a little close, but I'm pretty sure we missed him. Now, I have to think here, which part of... Oh, we're close to this side here. Let's go ahead and turn it down this way. Our steering's good, so I've been using the steering here. Everything looks good there. Let's go ahead and tap the brakes a little bit. All right, we're good on that end. You'll find that this aircraft is very light, and you don't need much throttle at all to taxi, which is obviously... I guess it has some pros and cons. Like I said, you'll get thrown around in bad weather, but it's also pretty easy to take off in this thing. So let's go ahead and roll up here. See, we're going pretty fast around this corner. And you still got the throttle pretty low. So let's go ahead and set the parking brake here. And we'll go through the before takeoff checklist. We have set the parking brake. We're going to go ahead and check to make sure our flight controls are all free and clear. Everything's looking good to me. Looking good, feeling great. We are going to set the flaps 0 to 15 degrees. I'm going to leave the flaps at 0 because we do have quite a long runway here at Sedona Airport. We can set the trim for takeoff, which the trim wheel's right here. We've got neutral takeoff already on there, so we don't need anything else just for that. We got the landing lights that we can turn on. Check the instruments one last time, and everything obviously is still looking good for me. Nothing too much has changed. So let's go ahead, and we need to release the parking brake down here. And then we are ready to take off in this thing. So for takeoff, we are going to push the throttle to the max. We're going to pull back slightly on the stick to keep the nose wheel elevated. We're going to return the stick to neutral after takeoff and make sure that we're above 59 knots of indicated airspeed. And if we did have flaps set, we would reduce to 0 degrees only after we have a indicated airspeed of above 59. So let's go ahead and get her going here. Pull back a little bit. Try to keep it centered. There we go. We're now up in the air. Now if you'll notice down here, this is actually in kilometers per hour instead of knots, so don't think that we're going 140 knots already. That is just in kilometers per hour. Something that's a little frustrating, but if I bump out to the exterior view, you will actually see the knots in the bottom left, so we are obviously way above the 59. We're good on that. So let's actually work through the climb checklist here, which is just an airspeed of 78 knots is the best climb rate. We just monitor our instruments to get to talk about our cruise checklist, I guess. We would set our cruise power and monitor the fuel quantity and instruments. Everything would be fine on that. So that does it for the cold and dark start to cruise checklist video. I want to thank you all for watching. and I hope to see you all in the next video.